Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a big post on Twitter, I might have covered it already, about what unpopular or controversial woo-wah opinion has got you basically 1v100ing. And one post in particular really stood out to me. There's a lot of stuff talking about like wee-wah and why it's not great or why wee-wah is really good. The post that stood out to me here is actually talking about Phoebe, debuffs, and of course, Spectro Frazzle. Phoebe sets a bad precedent for character design, needing other characters to function properly. It's only fine now because the character she needs is free. But there might be a time when that same character is needed by two different teams, so one will have to give it up. And I'm going to be entirely 100% real here. I think that this take is pretty based. I think that this take is actually something that is pretty well thought out and addresses a couple of the issues that I've been seeing with the design of some of the characters. And the example that I want to bring up over here to tee us off and draw a little bit of a comparison is, of course, this guy. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Honkai Star Rail. This is Harmony Trailblazer. And Harmony Trailblazer is essentially one of the best free-to-play units in Honkai Star Rail. And the reason for that is they enable an archetype called Super Break that deals a shit ton of damage if you're pairing it with the right units. And of course, the right unit is going to be a character like Firefly, who needs Harmony Trailblazer on their team in order to activate Super Break. And if they don't have Harmony Trailblazer, well, they have a bit of an issue dealing damage. This is kind of like when they were released. In the current state of Honkai Star Rail, the MC cannot take on two forms at a time. Very, very similar to Wuthering Waves. And this is the thing. They released in Honkai Star Rail a new version of the Trailblazer called the Remembrance one. And this is something you cannot run alongside the Harmony team. And as a result, what occurs is if you want to access the new stronger Trailblazer, or not really stronger, but the new just as strong Remembrance Trailblazer, you have to take them off of Harmony and essentially make a character like Firefly kind of unusable. However, the Honkai Star Rail devs made sure that that was addressed. They did this. They released another character called Fug You, right? And Fug You, this character allows you to basically take the Super Break functionality from Harmony Trailblazer, and then they put it on a 5-star limited unit, which you have to pull on the banner for to actually use in the first place. And this was the dynamic that is essentially built up. You had this character who works well in a free-to-play team, much like how Phoebe works well in a free-to-play team with Spectro Rover. But now, if you want to use the full power of something like the new Remembrance Trailblazer, you essentially have to pull Fug You, or your Firefly, and also Rappa will not be usable in endgame content. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that might actually be building up in Wuthering Waves. Because Phoebe, in her current state, is essentially hyper-dependent on having Spectro Frazzle available on her enemies, because the main part of her kit is essentially her heavy attack Star Flash. This ability, if enemies have Spectro Frazzle on them, gains a 256% damage amplification. And this damage amplification is really, really, really important because, well, her Star Flash doesn't really deal any meaningful damage at all if you don't have Frazzle on them. This is about 246% motion value. That is kind of awful for an attack. That's really, really, really low. And so if this damage amp isn't there, Phoebe just kind of deals no damage in her damage mode. However, she is a support as well and can apply Spectro Frazzle. But if you are in her damage role, there's nothing you can really do without another unit doing Frazzle. And if you're in her support role, there's nothing you can really do either because there's no DPS that's actually able to make use of her. And so what we're seeing, in my opinion at the very least, is a little bit of this sort of like codependency, this necessary requirement to slot a character with another character for them to work. Phoebe, in her confession state, where she's applying Spectro Frazzle but doesn't gain access to any damage amps, like over here, 255% damage multiplier if you're in Absolution, only Frazzle if you're in Confession. Her Confession mode is currently the most useless thing in the game. It might as well not exist in the current version of her kit. It does absolutely nothing in any content at all. And she requires or will require another character that either consumes her Spectro Frazzle stacks or like deals more damage the more stacks there are on the enemy for her to actually meaningfully do anything. And that character is not out yet. And what that means is across our limited 5-star units, we're likely going to see more of these sort of like codependencies where you need to pull one limited 5-star. And then, you know, if your free to play option goes out the window, like Harmony Trailblazer did for Firefly, if you want to use Remembrance, which is also very strong, then, well, you need to pull another limited 5-star to make use of the 5-star that you already pulled. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, Phoebe, without a Spectro Rover on her team, is, in my opinion, one of the worst units in the game. Genuinely, one of the worst units in the game. And this is the thing. Spectro Rover already has a different version that you might want to use. The Havoc one is already quite powerful, especially with people being able to get their S6, which grants a whopping 25% crit rate boost. And when you look at the Pride One tier list for the game, I know you might not think that they're super accurate. They've done their damage calculations, and Havoc Rover is actually genuinely one of the best DPS characters in the game with their free S6 that everyone's been able to get. And guys, when you have this sort of free-to-play option that's extremely strong, but then you have other free-to-play options which are extremely strong as well, you're going to run into a bit of an impasse. Currently, if you want to use Phoebe in any of her teams, you essentially cannot use Havoc Rover. And if there ever comes a situation, right, when there's a stronger version of Rover released, then what are you going to do with the Spectro version when you want to use that other Rover? What are you actually going to do? It's either you get to use the new Rover or your Phoebe is not really playable. And it's a little bit unfortunate, right, that we're seeing these codependencies build up, because this is a dynamic that isn't very healthy in Honkai Star Rail. It is not very healthy at all. And we all know from looking at the Beyond the Overture trailer, right, the Beyond the Overture trailer that we had for version 2.1, there's something going on here, right? A lot of people are speculating that this means that there's a new version of Rover coming. And we all know that the MC in Wuthering Waves is actually quite strong and is clearly usable on a lot of different teams. And if we're going to have a third one that comes out, like I've been mentioning before, that makes you want to switch off of Spectro, there's going to be no use for Phoebe, and you're also going to probably have another 5-star limited character that releases, that interacts with Spectro Frazzle, and then helps fill in the gaps across the roster. And unfortunately, guys, I think we might end up in a bit of a similar phenomenon to what we're seeing in Honkai Star Rail. You might say it's a little bit more healthy in Wuthering Waves because you can only have 3 units on every single team, but this is a bit of a troubling dynamic where we're seeing all of these different codependencies being built up, and the solution being pulling more limited 5-star characters. And we've already seen how that occurs in Honkai Star Rail. And so what I'm really hoping to see in the future, and maybe this is something that's just like absolutely ridiculously just a crazy suggestion, I'd like to see the different versions of Rover actually turn into their own characters that can all be usable at the same time. I feel like that would be the sort of like band-aid, not really even a band-aid solution, almost like a system solution that would go ahead, nip all of these potential issues from Honkai Star Rail that might be in Wuthering Waves in the bud, or like nip it, just nip it, get it out of the way. Just don't let the different versions of Rover all be played on the same team, right? So you can't just run like 3 versions of Rover at once, but allow, especially in content like Whimpering Wastes, like one version of Rover to be used on one side and then the other version of Rover to be used on the other side. And I think that this would be the best overall solution to this sort of like problem that we're having over here. Because if we're gonna make 5-star limited characters rely on another, we should ensure that that reliance is both on a free-to-play unit and is available all the time, no matter what. And I hope this is something that they introduce. I hope that this is a mechanic that they build in when the next version of Rover releases. Because right now, having to choose between Havoc and Spectro is a big pain for a lot of free-to-play players. And when that third version of Rover is ready to go, it's going to be an even bigger issue for a character like Phoebe, who's supposed to be one of the highest value characters in the game, one of the most valuable ones, a limited 5-star, who has her own signature. And so with that, I know it's a little bit early to be bringing this all up. I know that Wuthering Waves, with its character design and, you know, potentially predatory nature of that character design, is nowhere near where it is for Honkai Star Rail. But I do believe that when it comes to a post like this and then seeing how it's reasoned out, the writing is on the wall. This is something that could legitimately become a concern in the future. And I don't think it's something, right, where we're like necessarily doom posting, where we're going ahead and we're making a big issue out of nothing, because this is the thing. It currently already exists in the game. The issue is already there. If you want to use Phoebe, you can never use Havoc Rover, and that's not something that a lot of people particularly like. And so hopefully we can send in the feedback, we can get this addressed, we can make the game as accessible as possible, and limit a lot of the sort of like predatory PTSD that I know a lot of gacha players have, because Honkai Star Rail is a very popular game that a lot of people have unfortunately quit because of the nature of how they're doing things like this. And it would be awful. It would be terrible for Wuthering Waves to go down a similar path in the future. So with that, let me know what you all think. Was this a little bit unnecessary? Is this a concern that we should be talking about right now? And peace out.